Good morning, everyone. We're going to start. The rabbi will be in a moment, but so we can get going and not hold people up. Page 6, please rise if you're able. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nosanu Yisrael b'chein u'bein yom u'bein laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sh'aseh b'tzamah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sh'aseh Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu haolam sh'anochni ben chorim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam palkei ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam abish aramim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam atir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokei kufufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roharat arat al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sh'aseh li kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamachi matzeh gavar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'sefara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanotein le'ach koach. You may be seated. Keinu yom v'chol v'chein v'chesed rachamim menei v'chol rochei v'chol v'chasedim tovim baruch atah Adonai gomel chasedim tovim li'amo Yisrael. Hear its own. Ashreinu matov chalkeinu amago elenu go elenu yishusenu. Ashreinu mishadachim v'chim erevarim erev boka romrim b'payim b'kol yom. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Page 8. Kadesh Hashem kol b'kadosh Hashem Elohim tarim Elohim kanenu. Baruch atah Adonai Kadesh Hashem kol b'rabim. Complete page 8. Some of the selections on the following pages, ending on the bottom of page 12. Yehi ritzon v'lefanei Adonai Eloheinu v'elhevasenu shetazeh chachenu b'torah v'nechol al hararon hakohen ohev shalom ohev es briot m'kondot la Torah. Kaddish the Rabbanan, page 13. Those in mourning, those with yortzites, or anyone else who would like to join us. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabo. V'yalmo divro kirosei v'yalmich malkusei. V'chayachon of yomachon v'chayachol beish Yisrael. V'algol izman karim v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei rabo mavorach le'olam omei omai. Yisbarach v'yistabach v'yisva'av v'yisraman v'yisnasei. V'yisadav v'yisalev v'yisalo shmei dekadeshua barechu. Elam and Kol B'chosa v'Shirosa, Tish B'chosa v'Nechamosa, Damiran v'Alma v'Imru Amen. Al Yisrael, v'Al Rabbanan, v'Al Tamideha, v'Al Kol Tamidei Tamidehan, v'Al Kol Man, V'Yaskim v'Yoraya Sodi v'Yatar Hachet Nechein L'Chol Asar v'Yasar, Yehei L'chon Shlomo Rabba, Hina v'Chesed v'Rachamim, Hei V'Richa v'Mizvor v'Richa, V'Gadam Miv T'Kadamu v'Chayim L'Shemai v'Imru Amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya, v'Chayim Tovim Aleinu v'Yal Kol Yisrael v'Yimru Amen. Asa Shalom b'Mrama, hu Rachamim Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu v'Yal Kol Yisrael v'Yimru Amen. Page 14, Ms. Mushir. Laman Zemerka Kavod Lo Adom Adonai Elam Odecha. One is Kaddish, page 15. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabba. V'yalmo divro kirusei v'yamlich malkusei. B'chayachon of Yom Echon, B'chai L'Kol Beis Yisrael, Ba'agol Ezman Karim V'Yimru, Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mavorach Leolam Omei Omaya. Yisbarach v'yistabach v'yisva'av v'yisraman v'yisnaseh v'yisadav v'yisalev v'yisalo shmei d'kedeshah barechu elam and kol brachosa v'shirosa tush brachosa v'nechamasa damiran v'alma v'imru amen Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen Aseh shalom b'mrama hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Page 16, please rise if you're able. Baruch Shemar Adonai. Hold on. Yechid Kelamim Melech Mashmur Aviad Shema Hagadol Baruch Adonai Melech Mahula B'Tish B'Chos. You may be seated. The second paragraph on page 20. We don't say the first one today. I've gotten that right finally after all these years. Go up. V'hu rachum yifeh od v'lo yishav shoah lo yish l'chol hamato Adonai Hoshiach HaMelech Yinenu b'yom koreinu. 21. Ashrei Ashrei Besecha od halucha sela.
Lechol asher yikru ve'emed.
Tilas Adonai Rebbepi v'reib kol b'sor shem k'dsholi olam v'ed v'nachnu niverak yah me'ato olam hallelujah. Middle of page 25, and Rabbi, are you ready to take over?
Sure. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehalel yah, hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehalel yah, hallelujah. If you're able to, please rise. We continue with the bottom paragraph. Baruch Adonai amen v'amen. Baruch Adonai mitzvihon shochenu shalom. Baruch Shem Kevodo Kevodo Le'olam V'Amalek Kol Haaretz Amen V'Amen. We continue on page 29. Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu. Barachot v'odod me'anta v'yad olam Baruch ata Adonai El Malkado Batishpachot El Haodahot Adon HaNiflaot Abocher B'shirei Zimra Melchachei HaOlamim Yitgado v'yikara Shemei Rabbah V'yamad v'rakhrutei v'yamlik malchutei V'chayechon v'meichon v'chayechol Beit Yisrael V'gala u'bizman kari v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mavarach Le'olam Olomei Homaya Yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpor v'yitrom ha'mitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei Dukudesha Berechu Le'elam Nichol Berachad v'shivanta Tushbachad v'rechamata Amiran Be'alma v'imru Amen. Page 30. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Feel free to be seated. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Yotzer Oro Borei Hoshech Oseh Shalom uvaret hakol. We continue with the next three paragraphs individually. Hameir la'aretz v'rei ha'barachim tu v'chadet shoya. Ekul b'chachmasi tamaretz yanecha. El baruch gadol de'ah heichinu fa'hazahar echama. Barak surinu malkeinu gohaleinu orei kadoshim ishtabakshim chalad malkeinu. Kulam ovim, kulam brurim, kulam giburim, bechulam osim be'ema, be'aratzon kohonam, bechulam podchim epihem begdusha v'tahara, b'shirav zimra, umvarchim v'shamchim, farim umaritzim, umakdishim, umamlichim, et shem ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol, ha'gibor v'rarah kadoshu. V'chulam mekablim aleihem al malchut shamayim zeh mizeh v'nodim reshut zeh lazeh lagdish yotzram ben nachat ruach b'safa b'u'avrim akedosha kulam ki'echararim v'yomrim v'yira kadosh 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 Adonai tzvahot malok haaretz kivodo v'alfarim v'chayot hakodesh Barash gadol b'nasim liumat rafim liumatam mishabchim ve'omrim Baruch kivod Adonai mimkomo. Bottom of 31. La'el Baruch nimoti teinu Lamelech v'chayam zmiot yomeru nishproshayim Baal minochamot zoret tzedakot mazmiach Yeshua. That was weird. Or chadash al Zion ta'ir v'nizkeh kulanu me'era le'ero baruch at Adonai yotzer ha'me'orot. We continue on page 32. Ahavar abav tanu Adonai Eloheinu chem l'gadot terach malta aleinu. If you're wearing a talit, this is the time that we begin to gather the four tzitzit, the four fringes from the four corners. We gather them together and hold them as we ask God to gather our people together from the four corners of the earth and reunite us in the land of Israel. We'll continue with that prayer, followed by the Shema, beginning at the bottom of 32. B'havayenu l'shalom me'arba kanfot ha'aretz, v'tolechenu kol ma'ayot le'harseinu, ki el po'el yeshuot ata, ובאנו בחרת בכל המרשם לקרבתן לשמך הגרוס אלה באמת להודות לך ויחדך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. Page 33. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shiftecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shochvecha uv'kumecha u'kshartam le'od al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha. We'll continue by ourselves with the rest of the Shema, pages 33 and 34. V'haya'im shemoa tishmo al mitzvotai. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe le'mor. Let's see. Ashel atem zonim. Adonai Elohechem Emed V'yatsi v'nachon v'kayam v'yashar L'dor v'ador hu kayam u'shmo kayam v'chiso nachon u'malchuto b'manata olad kayamet. Okay, so seat last time. Let it fall back to the four corners of our talito. We continue with the bottom paragraph, page 34. Udabarab chayim v'kayamim ne'emanim v'nechmadim. Emet shatahu Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu malkeinu melech avoteinu. Go aleinu, go el avotenu, yotzvenu zu yeshuatenu, podenu umatzilenu melam shemecha, ein Elohim zulatecha. Ezra avotenu atahu me'olam. Page 35. Tehilot Elyon Baruch Hu Vorach Moshe U'bnei Yisrael Lachanu Shira B'simcha Rabbah V'yamru Kulam Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai Mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh Nehora tehilot osefele Shira chadasha shibechu geulim L'shimcha sifatayam Yachad kulam Hodu ve'imlechu ve'amru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. If you're able to, please rise. Tzur Yisrael Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael Uftechidu mecha Yehuda ve'Yisrael Go aleinu Adonai tzivot shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. We'll begin the Amidah for the Shacharit service together. On 36b, we'll continue together through page 37 in the Kedusha. Then we'll pick up individually 38 through 44. There is no Tachanun today. So sorry for all you Tachanun enthusiasts. We're really out of Tachanun for an entire month. But right now we'll continue with the Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ho'el Gadol HaGibor V'Nara, Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei HaKol, Zocher Chasdei Avot, Umevi Goel Livnei V'nehem, L'man Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer Foked HaMashiach Magen Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen Abraham Ufoked Sarah, Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye Metim, Ata Rav Lahoshia, Mashiv haruach umorid hagasha mechalchel chaim v'chesed mechaye meitim brachamim rabim somech noflim v'rofei holim umatir asurim umekayem emunato lishenei afar mi chamocha bal gevurot umido melach melch memit umekayem atzmiach Yeshua B'nei manatah chayot meitim baruch ata Adonai Mechaye hametim. Nikadesh et shimcha ba'olam keshem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom kakatuv ayad neviecha v'kara zeh el zeh ve'amar. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Melech Haaretz Kivodo, Leumatam Baruch Yomeru. Baruch Kivod, Adonai Mimkomo, Divrei Kodshecha Katuv Lemor. Yimloch Adonai le'olam adahayich Sion, Lador vador, hallelujah. Lador vador nagid god lecha, uletzach nitzachim, kedushat chanakti, shivcha Eloheinu mipinu. Lo yamush le'olam vahed, kiel malchado v'kadosh ata, baruch ata Adonai, ha'el ha'kadosh. I'm not saying Freddie's got me focused on me, but I'm not moving. That means I'm focused.
But I don't know. Can't tell which.
You gotta just move around a bit, but
Yeah.
if you're not seeing any movement.
I hear you.
Yeah, the audio seems fine. The video, though, it looks like I'm not moving.
I hear you.
Yeah, it's just the video seems like it's still.
Yeah, no, I see you. I just see you walking over.
Okay, so maybe it's me.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, there we are. Okay, yeah, much better. Okay, if you are still finishing up.
I saw you walk over.
Okay, great. Yeah, now I'm moving now too. If you are finished up the Amidah, feel free to continue. If there's anybody on live stream who needs person or people included in our Misha Barak prayer, which we're going to do in just a minute, please let me know through the live stream comment section. Again, we had some little bit of problem with video, but it looks like the video is working okay now. We always have to monitor these things when we're on live stream, because even if we're here, there are other people who are depending on us to be able to live stream to them where they are, and we need to make sure that's working too. Before we recite our Misha Barak prayer, we do need to recite Chatzi Kaddish, and you can find that in a number of places. I'll direct you, though, to page 64. Yikadal v'yikadash shemer rabam v'yamar b'rakruteh v'yamlich malchuteh v'chayechon v'mechon v'chadachol beit Yisrael b'gala v'zman karim v'imru amen Yehei shmer rabam v'vorach le'olam olomei maya Yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpoar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemir kodeshah rechu le'la mincha brachata v'shirata u'shbechata v'nechemata Damiran be'alma v'imru amen. If there's anybody who has someone they'd like to have included in our Misha Barak prayer who's here, feel free to rise at your seats and announce the name or names of those you're praying for out loud in unison as I am scanning our Misha Barak list, and I'll try to include names of anybody who's been requested online. Misha Barak Avoteinu Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sararib Karachel v'Leah V'Yivarech v'Yirafeh et HaCholim. V'yirko cholim b'kila krashahan zoda kadosh baruch hu. Yimalei rachamim aleihem laksi kamalapotam v'yishlach lemehera. Refuah shlema min hashamayim. Fura nefesh refura guf tochshro cholei banecha v'chazek. Eidos k'musar chayhem ashtah. Bagdos man kreven amar. Amen. May God bless our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Bring blessing and healing to all those who are prayed for today, to all those members of our congregation, our community, our loved ones who are ill, to all those, including the number of people I know in our congregation, but especially those people who are afflicted right now with COVID-19. At this time, we're going to continue on page... Oh, actually, is there anybody who needs a memorial prayer for a yurtzeit? I forgot to ask about that. Otherwise, let's go to page 78 for Ashrei. Ashrei Shabbatech, Hariyochas, Hashem Shalom, Ashrei Ham, Shadonai Elohim. Tehillat Adonai Deber Pi V'Vorei Kabasar Shem Kodsho Le'olam Va'ed V'Anachnu Nevarachia Me'ata V'Ad Olam. Hallelujah. So, thank you, Michael. I was hoping that someone would let us know. Page 80. Ubalat Zion Goel. ויפתחו בחיירי שמך, כי לא עזבת דורשך, אדוני. Adonai chafetz leman tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir. We continue with Kaddish Shalem, page 82. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabba, v'yamad v'rachute v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechona v'bechona v'charecho beit Yisrael, v'agalav izman karim v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam ulomei olmaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpor v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקדושה ברכו לעילה מנך ברכת ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן תתקבל סלוטון ובאותון דכל ישראל קדם אבוהון דבי שמיה ואמרו אמן יהי שלום רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום בברמה ויעשה שלום Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. If you're able to, please rise. Aleinu, page 83. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol lateit gedula leotzer breshit shelo asanu kigoye ha'aratzot velo samanu kamishpachot adama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem V'gor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei malach malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Al kene kabela haranano hene linot meheno tertezechon. V'nemar v'haya Adonai l'malech al kol haaretz bayom hahu Yeah, Adonai Echad, Ushemo, Echad. Before we recite Kaddish, I want to extend our condolences once again on behalf of our entire congregation to Cliff and Matilda Broder and the entire Broder family on the passing of Bradley Broder, and also to Jerry Cohn and the entire Cohn family, and the passing of our longtime member, friend, and sisterhood leader, Marilyn Cohn. We pray, may God send you comfort. Among all those who mourn, among Zion and Jerusalem, may you know no more sorrow. May your loved one's memory be for a blessing. On this, the 14th day of Nisan, Erev Pesach, we mark the following yahrzeits: Georgette Adler, Julius Brzezowski, Martin Burwasser, Bessie Cohn, Emmanuel Duchovny, Joseph Ehrlich, Martin Ehrlich, Gussie Garber, Mildred Horwit, Matilda Caro, Harry Rich, Yetta Schneider, Shirley Wertheimer, Hortense Zalen, Debbie Zweibel, Hilda Zweibel, and Marvin Zweibel. May their memories all be for a blessing if you were a mourner. If you're observing a yahrzeit, if you'd like to say Kaddish for any reason, please join me, page 84. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba be'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael v'agala u'v'izman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam ulomei olmaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpoar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha brechu La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu V'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav Hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. You'll find the Psalm for Friday at the top of page 90. Hayom Yom Shishi B'Shabbat Shebo Hayom Hamikdash. Mikolot Ma'im Rabim Adirim Mishbereyam Adir Bamarom Adonai Edotecha Lemnu Ma'od Veit Chanava Kodesh Adonai La'orech Yamim. Once again, if you're a mourner, if you're observing a yard site, if you'd like to say Kaddish with me for any reason, if you're able to, please rise. Kaddish is found page 84. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'vchayei dechol beit Yisrael bagala u'vizman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ulomei olmaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpoar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brechu le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran b'yoma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu'ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. At this point, we're going to multitask. Before we need to pass out the handouts for the siyum. At the same time, I've got a late Misha Berach request, so hang on one second. I'm going to see if Larry, I always ask you to do this, but can I ask you to pass out the handouts? And while that's happening, again, we had some glitches in our tech this morning, so that may be why I'm only seeing this now, but we can take care of it. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yahakov Sarv Karachel v'Layahu B'Ach V'Yila Petach Holim Stan V'Ruth Press Kadosh Baruch Hu Yimerachim Imhanam Naksi Kamarap Otam V'Yishlach Meharu Fuah Shlem Amin Hashamayim Fur Nefesh Fur Aguf Tok Shachol Heba Nech Avichazek Eidos Yomosarche Hemashta Bagluzman Karev Ramahar. Amen. And again, Alan Refuah Shlema to both of the people that we're praying for. So, while Larry is finishing passing the handouts out, as I'm sure most of you, maybe all of you know, there is a tradition that the firstborn, and again, in my interpretation, not everybody's, it's the firstborn males and females, though we seem to have a very decidedly male crowd here today, are supposed to fast from the morning sun up, on the morning before Passover until Seder night. The reason, of course, is to remember the firstborn of the Jewish people were passed over by God when God brought the 10th plague on Egypt and killed all the Egyptian firstborn. And I guess in order to really recognize the solemnity of that and how easily we could have been among those who were killed, we traditionally fast on the holiday of Passover the day before, from sunrise to sunset. However, there is a very big exception built into Jewish law and tradition. If you just happen to be in a situation where somebody is finishing a major unit of Jewish learning, usually a tractate of Talmud, but can be other things as well, if you participate in that last bit of learning, then you are entitled to celebrate along with the person who has been learning what is called a siyum, a meal that marks the completion of, a celebratory meal, I should say, that marks the completion of a unit of learning. And you just happen to be in the room today with somebody who has been studying a tractate of Talmud and is about to finish up his study and would love to have other people to celebrate the siyum with, especially since we've got lots of chametz that we'd love to have you finish off. So this year I've lately been picking parts of the Talmud that have two specific characteristics. One, things that I haven't learned before. I would love to tell you I've learned the whole Talmud. That's hardly true. But the second characteristic narrows down to a lot of things that I have not, really rules out a number of things, because it also has to be a tractate that is fairly easily digestible and won't take me forever to learn, because I have to be ready to teach you on the morning before Passover. So our tractate this morning is Tractate Sefer Torah, Masachet Sefer Torah. As is noted at the top of our page, it is one of 7 small tractates, Masechtot Ketanot, that address topics that there is no specific tractate for in the Mishnah or Talmud. And interestingly enough, of all the topics that get attention in the Mishnah and Talmud, including things that we would never think about, like, for example, the Nazarite, or the tractate devoted to making sure that we leave the corners of our field for the poor, or different kinds of other offerings that we need to bring. There is no tractate of the Talmud, the traditional Babylonian Talmud, that's specifically devoted to the laws of the Torah scroll, which is interesting. So the rabbis created one. There is really no clear time frame for when this was created. It's written in sort of the terse style of the Mishnah, but it could have been written quite a bit later. We really don't know. But it is nonetheless a very useful and practical tractate, which is one reason I wanted to study it. As is noted here, this tractate is very similar to the beginning of Masechet Sofrim, which talks about the laws for scribes as well. That may be my project next year, we'll have to see. So there are 5 chapters in Masechet Sefer Torah. The first 2 chapters address the process of writing a Torah scroll and the permitted parchments. And a few things that I learned along the way that I'll just share with you. Number 1, yes, as you probably know, Torah scrolls have to be written on the skins of kosher animals. There is no such thing as, for example, a bear skin Torah. However, those animals do not have to undergo kosher slaughter. Animals can be used, animal skins can be used. Those who were slaughtered improperly, or even if animals that died on natural causes or are roadkill, any of those skins can still be used to write a Torah, which is an interesting thing. There is a debate in our tradition about which side of the skin to write on. Animal skins have 2 sides. They have the outer side. Most of the time has hair on it, at least before it's tanned and cured, and the inside. And interestingly, in the beginning of time, it was more often the case to write a Torah on the outer side of the animal skin. That's called the gvil. Today, most Torahs are written on the inside, the cloth. There's also a lot of material, which I did not memorize, devoted to how much margin and space you've got to leave between columns of the Torah, between sections of the Torah. What happens if you run out of room before you can finish a sentence and you need to add an extra word? All those things. And if you look at ancient Torah scrolls, and we don't have any going back as far as this, this is probably 1,500 years at least. But if you look at ancient Torah scrolls, you'll notice that the writing is a little bit less uniform. If somebody misses a word, they will sometimes write in the margins according to the instructions in this tractate. What else can I tell you? Okay, so the 3rd chapter addresses the proper treatment of a Torah scroll, and these are some laws that you might be familiar with, but just things to highlight here. First of all, interestingly, there's a debate about how far you have to keep the Torah open while you're reading. And if you notice, we have a pretty wide reader's table. Technically, in this Masechet Sefer Torah, you have to keep the Torah 4 columns wide open when you're reading. That probably would have our Torah rolling off the table, I think. You'll be happy to know that in Tractate Sofrim, it's only 3 columns, and that's typically the arrangement that we use if we can. Another thing to remember is we want to treat the Torah with respect. Therefore, we don't sit down, for example, on a bench or a chair that the Torah is sitting. We do sometimes prop the Torahs on a separate chair and sit down next to it, but we would never sit down we would never share the same bench with the Torah. The 4th and 5th chapters, which are the concluding chapters, address the names of God, and there's a long list of names of God that you can't erase. These are the names that subsequently anything that has those names has to be buried. And also the process of writing God's names and the prohibition of erasing them. If you happen to make a mistake while you're writing God's name, there are some very specific guidelines about what to do about that. Also important to, so then that brings us really to the last couple of sections of Masechet Sofrim, or Masechet Sefer Torah, on the next page. I'm going to share these two sections with you. This will conclude our unit of study. Both of them are kind of interesting. You'll notice the picture on top. It was not hard to find this picture online. If you think that tattoos with God's name on them are only a modern phenomenon, Masechet Sefer Torah proves us wrong. Hakotev Shem al Besaro, lo yirchatz v'lo yasuch. So if somebody writes the divine name on their body, and in theory you could do it in a Sharpie, I suppose, but you could imagine this being a tattoo as well, you're not supposed to bathe or anoint yourself. So if you can't, why would you not want to do that? Because clearly, I guess I'm kind of lecturing here because we're on live stream and you guys don't have microphones, but the purpose of, you wouldn't want to wash it or bathe it, anoint it, because you wouldn't want to mar the divine name. That's the opinion of the rabbis. Rabbi Yossi, who I think is a little bit more reasonable, Omer, mutar b'vad shel yishaf shef. So you can wash yourself. You can't go around like smelling like locker room. It's just because you had the temerity to write God's name on your flesh. Just don't try to rub it off. Try to be careful around it. A couple other situations where this might happen. Al keren hapara ve'al karei hamita. So if you happen to write God's name on the horn of a cow or on the legs of a bed, and you would do that, why would you do that? Because it's kind of like to ward off evil spirits. There was a belief that if you wrote God's name on the horn of a cow, or the leg of a bed, under certain circumstances, it would protect you against any evil that might come. It was superstition, but people apparently did this. So what happens? You've written something that can't be erased. How do you handle it? And you wouldn't be surprised to know if it's. Sorry, how did I do this? Oh yes, okay. So if you wrote it on the horn of a cow or on the legs of a bed, goran ugnozan, you can scrape it off, and it says store it away. What it means is you put it in a geniza. You actually can. What we would do today would be to bury it. Again, we have all kinds of ritual objects, tefillin, mezuzahs, Torah scrolls, sidurim, for example, that have God's name. And what do you do with them when they're worn out or when you don't want them anymore? You bury them. You put them in a storage room so that they can be respectfully handled. And it is, and we'll talk about this in a minute, storage has to be done in an appropriate and respectful way. Another possibility is Evan, if you write God's name on a stone. I'm not sure why you would do that, but again, you can imagine. That's a similar situation. Shomta ugonza. You scrape it off the best. You detach it. You take it, the piece of the stone where the God's name is written, and again, you bury it. You store it away. You give it a respectful disposal. So once something has God's name on it, it has to be treated with utmost care, even if it's you. There has to be shown respect for God's name, no matter where it's written. Our last section has to do with the question of what do we do when, again, a Torah scroll or another holy object that has God's name in it is worn out. If you need to cut out a strip of a scroll, I'm not sure why you would want to do that, but if you, maybe, for example, if you had an extra, suppose you wrote a scribe, you wrote a Torah, and you end up having to trim the margins, for example, that might be a possibility. So what is the status of that extra piece of scroll? Even if it doesn't have God's name in it, you can do it b'chadashim mutar. If these are new scrolls, they haven't been put into service yet, they haven't been used for a holy purpose, you can in fact take that piece of skin, the piece of parchment that you've cut out, and you can use it for something else. It doesn't have to be a holy purpose. However, bishenim asur. If something has already been used for a holy purpose, if you've got a Torah scroll, you can't just decide to trim it down if it's been used already and put into service as a Torah scroll. it becomes, not by virtue of the fact that it's part of a Torah scroll, but by virtue of the fact that it's been used for a holy purpose, that becomes a sacred object. And you can't just blithely dispose of it. You can't just cut out a strip and use it for something else. Makak hasfarim, b'makak tatfilin, u'makak metafchot me'asfarim, hare elo yignuzu v'lo yonicham. So if there's any number of things, we know about this now, things that you do have to bury. Worn out scrolls, or worn out Sefer Torah, tefillin, the wraps of scrolls, even they have to be buried. They can't be destroyed. So even that little Velcro tie that we use to tie up the Torah scrolls, you can't just throw it away when it wears out. You have to, again, properly dispose of it. So you have to put it in you can't put it in an unclean place. You can't just throw it in the trash. You can't just dump it in a landfill. You have to put it in an appropriate place. And again, typically what we do is we feel that just as human beings, that the way to give human beings dignity after they've passed on is to bury them. So too, typically we bury parts of holy books, Torahs, etc. Merkavin me alehem. And the idea is that they're supposed to not be, you don't hasten their destruction, they decompose of their own accord. So we just like people return to the earth, so too our scrolls return to the earth. And with that thought, which is again very practical in terms of how we dispose of holy books, etc., we end our study of Masechet Sefer Torah. And when we do that, there is a whole series of declarations and prayers that we make, which begin on your third page of your handout. Hadran alach Masechet Sefer Torah v'hadrach alan, datan alach Masechet Sefer Torah v'datach alan. Lo nitneshe minach Masechet Sefer Torah, lo nitneshe manan, v'lo ba'alma hadein, v'lo ba'alma da'ate. And of course we do this twice more. Hadran alach Masechet Sefer Torah, hadrach alan, datan alach Masechet Sefer Torah v'datach alan, lo nitneshe minach Masechet Sefer Torah, v'lo titneshe minan, lo ba'alma hadein, v'lo ba'alma da'ate. Hadran alach Masechet Sefer Torah v'hadrach alan, datan alach Masechet Sefer Torah v'datach alan, lo titneshe minach Masechet Sefer Torah v'lo titneshe minan, lo ba'alma hadein v'lo ba'alma da'ate. So basically telling us that we have finished our study of Masechet Sefer Torah. We're not going to forget it. It's going to always be with us in this world and the world to come. Yehi ratzon lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei avotenu, Shitehei Toratcha umanutenu ba'olam hazeh v'tehei imanu l'olam haba. And then we ask that God have the Torah with us in this world and the world to come. And then for some reason there's an incantation of 10 names of late rabbinic sages descended from Rav Papa. I don't know why we do this, but I wouldn't want to omit this very charming and weird tradition. Chanina bar Papa, Rami bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Abba Mari bar Papa, Ram bar Papa, Rachish bar Papa, Surchav bar Papa, Ada bar Papa, Daru bar Papa. May the words of the Torah, Lord our God, be sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of your people, so that we, our children, and all the children of the house of Israel may come to love you and want to study your Torah on its own accord. Through your commandments I am wiser than my enemies, for they are ever with me. May my heart be filled with your laws in order that I not despair. May I never forget your laws, for by them I am kept alive. Blessed are you, God, who teaches me your laws. Amen, amen, amen. Selah forever. We are thankful before you, God and God of our ancestors, that you have made our portion among those who sit in the house of study. You have not made our portion among those who sit idle. For we wake early and they wake early. We wake early for words of Torah and they wake early for idle words. We strive and they strive. We strive and receive reward and they strive and do not receive reward. We race and they race. We race down toward the afterworld, and they race toward destruction, as it is said. And you, God, will bring them down to destruction. Men of blood and deceit will not live out half their lives, and I will trust in you. And we conclude on the last page. Yiratzon mufanecha Adonai Elohai kashem she'azar tani l'sayem masechet sefer Torah ken ta'azren להתחיל מסכתות ספרים אחרים ולסיימם ללמוד ללמד לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. So please God, just as you gave us the merit of finishing the study of Masechet Sefer Torah, so may we learn and continue to learn other Masechtot and learn Torah in the future. וזכות כל התנאים והמורים והתלמידי החכמים יעמוד לי לזרעי שלא תמוש התורה מפי ומפי זרעי וזרע זרעי ad olam. So the words of Torah, should we hope, will not leave our mouths or the mouths of our children or our children's children forever. V'yitkayem bi b'hitalakecha tanche otach b'shach b'cha tishmor alecha v'hakitzo tihi tishichecha kivi yirvu yamecha v'yosifu lecha shtenot shchayim orech yamim b'mimina b'smola osher v'chavod Adonai oz le'amo yiten Adonai yvarech et amo v'shalom. God will give strength to his nation. God will bless his nation with peace. To everyone want to wish you a Chag Sameach. We're going to finish up our Siyum with Kaddish D'Rabbanan, Kaddish that we say when we finish a unit of study. That will be found on page 13. After Kaddish D'Rabbanan, there is a breakfast, and the breakfast is where, Alan? Ballroom. Breakfast is in the ballroom. Please join us. And if anybody hasn't yet sold their chametz and needs to, please come see me. If you don't have a form, let me know and I will go get you one, and we'll do what we got to do. Kaddish D'Rabbanan, page 13. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'gala u'v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Ulomei Omaya Yitbarak V'yishtabak V'yitpoar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitale V'yitalal Shemei D'Kudesha Brechu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damiran B'yoma V'imru. Amen. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Talmidehon ve'al kol Talmidei Talmidehon ve'al kol man di askin be'oraita di be'atra hadain v'di bechol atar ve'atar Yehei lahon ulachon shloma rabba china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin umzona revicha uforkana min kadam avohon di v'shemaya v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav huya aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. And as people are getting themselves, they're being put away. Reminder, services tonight online only, 6:30 p.m. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. here in PJC and online. Early mincha at 12. No Mariv service for Saturday night, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. And Sunday evening, 8 p.m. live stream only. Want to wish everybody once again, Chag Sameach. Yeah.
The table in the back. You would do it inside or?
Yeah, I'll bring everything inside. Does anybody else need a chametz form?